Peggy and Magguire was a 28-year-old loving mother and nurse who went missing from the small town of Stedham, Oklahoma, about 15 minutes northwest of Eufaula. She was last seen dropping her son off at Canadian Elementary School on November 16, 2015, after working a double shift at the Wellington Hills Nursing Center. On her way home, she had spoken to her stepfather, Donnie Davis, on the phone about building a deck and stated that she would call him back. However, that phone call never came. Peggy always picked up Ethan from school, but on this day, his father, Thomas McIntosh, picked him up. She and Thomas had started dating as sophomores in high school and had a tumultuous relationship. It is reported that he had been physically abusive toward her for years, including breaking her nose with a pistol, smashing her car windows, and even strangling her in front of their son. Peggy had gotten a protective order against him in February 2013 and later pressed charges against him for battery, but both were eventually dismissed. She reconciled with him because she wanted a secure family life for their son. Peggy was very close to her son, and he was always with her. When she didn't pick up Ethan from school and many calls and texts went unanswered, her mother, Betty Davis, reported her missing to the McIntosh County Sheriff's Department. At 5:20 a.m. the next day, during a storm, a very grainy surveillance video showed Peggy's 2012 Toyota Tundra driving into the parking lot of TNJ's Ice House, a rural roadside bar off Highway 9, 10 miles from her home. It showed a person getting out of the truck and walking away. It is reported that someone who lived near the bar was driving to work around the same time the truck was parked and spotted a man in the parking lot who then ducked into the woods. The truck was found later that day by Peggy's brother in the bar parking lot. Her family stated she didn't drink and didn't frequent the bar. When her truck was found at TNJ's Ice House, her boyfriend, Thomas, went to the bar. Police interviewed him there, and he suggested that Peggy had simply run away. However, their 8-year-old son later stated that even before her truck was found by Peggy's brother and police, his father drove him past the truck and told him his mother had run away with another man and left him. After her disappearance, police found traces of blood on the couch, on some rubber gloves, on a utility pail, and on the back porch of the home she shared with her son's father. But the samples were so degraded that investigators were unable to determine if it was human blood, much less Peggy's. There were also red stains on a leather glove in her truck and reddish-colored stains, either blood or rust, in the bucket of a front-loader tractor. It was several weeks before the couple's home and land were searched by police, and it isn't believed that any luminol testing was done. By the time of her disappearance, she had planned to leave Thomas for good. She had requested the upcoming weekend off from work so that she could move her things out of the house. Although they were still living together, their relationship was only platonic, and they were apparently in agreement about dating other people. Peggy had been talking to a man named Richard in Texas. He had planned to drive from Texas the day after she went missing to meet her. After her disappearance, Peggy's friend got in touch with Richard, who said that he had canceled his plans to meet her because he had to stay in Texas. Had Thomas pretended to be Richard and, in a jealous rage, murdered Peggy for wanting to date other men and leave him? Was Thomas involved at all? In addition, both Peggy's and Thomas's phones pinged in the area where she disappeared. Her family describes her as a dedicated mother who wouldn't have abandoned her son. Peggy's mother subsequently sued for visitation of her grandson, saying in court documents that she hadn't seen him since her daughter disappeared. She believed her daughter was deceased and thought her grandson was at risk for physical and/or emotional abuse at Thomas's hands. The county in which they lived was McIntosh County, the same as Thomas's last name, and his family was very well known. It is also reported that Thomas's neighbor saw someone driving a tractor around the time she disappeared, with the bucket raised high in the air, speeding on the road. He believed it to be Thomas's tractor. Tractor buckets are usually not raised while driving on the road, as it is safest to have them down. It is also reported that Thomas had recently purchased a barn around the time of her disappearance and that he placed cement on the floor of the barn. Thomas is considered a person of interest and is most likely the primary suspect by law enforcement. Even though no evidence has shown probable cause to arrest him, no evidence has been shown to rule him out either. As of today, her case remains unsolved. Tracy Diane Nelson was found murdered on her 20th birthday in her apartment in Jamestown Square in Moore, Oklahoma, on January 5, 1981. She was found by her husband and high school sweetheart, Jeffrey Nelson, to whom she had been married for 5 months. It is believed that Tracy was killed around noon that day due to several witnesses seeing her arriving home just before noon. Also, several phone calls from family and friends to wish her a happy birthday around noon went unanswered. It was presumed she had already been murdered by that time. However, she wasn't found until her husband came home around 5 p.m. that evening. When he arrived home and walked into their bedroom, he was met by an unimaginable scene. Tracy was lying face up on their bed. She was wearing blue jeans and a plaid shirt. She had been stabbed to death in their bedroom, and her throat had been slashed. Sexual assault during the attack could not be determined. There was no sign of forced entry or a struggle, but the apartment door was unlocked. A single fingerprint was found, described as one of the best pieces of evidence, but it remains unidentified. Police found a cable repair ticket for work done at the apartment that day at 11:51 a.m. However, authorities have never been able to identify the owner of the ticket book. It had a scribbled signature or initials at the bottom and included an employee number for a repair worker with Southwestern Bell Telephone Company, now a subsidiary of AT&T. As it turned out, no cable repair company was scheduled to be at the apartment that day. Presumably, somebody had stolen the cable repair ticket book and used it to gain entry to the home or left it on purpose as a ruse to throw off the investigation. Investigators started to trace her every move to determine what had happened. Tracy had started her morning off by running errands. Neighbors said they saw her completing chores at her house around noon. Her husband was quickly ruled out as a suspect, as he had a rock-solid alibi. He had attended college classes all day and then went shopping for a birthday present for Tracy. Jeffrey had bought her a bottle of perfume and planned on cooking 2 lobster tails he had purchased for them. She and her husband were both students at the University of Oklahoma. Tracy focused on physical therapy and working with people who had disabilities, while Jeffrey was studying to become an orthopedic surgeon. Missing from the murder scene was a personalized keyring with her name on it. It has never been recovered, and it is believed that the keyring may have been taken as a trophy by the killer. At the beginning, it was believed that Tracy was a targeted victim, though her husband now believes the killing might have been a random act. Shortly after Tracy's murder, 2 neighbors provided different descriptions of a man who was seen entering the Nelson home around the time of her murder. One described him as being in his late 20s, about 5'9" and 155 pounds, with dark, curly brown hair and a very short beard. The second witness described the man she saw as being in his early 30s, about 5'10", 150 to 170 pounds, with short black hair, worn in a military style with short sideburns. Years after the murder, the Nelson family helped OSBI convince state legislators to fund the state's first automated fingerprint identification system, which allowed fingerprints to be scanned into a central database. Unfortunately, the fingerprint found in the apartment still hasn't matched any in the system. Nevertheless, the groundbreaking system has led to the apprehension of perpetrators of hundreds of violent crimes across Oklahoma. As for Tracy, her murder still remains a mystery, and the case is unsolved. 19-year-old Melody Ann Jones was last seen in Earlsboro, Oklahoma, on May 4, 1983. She had spent the day fishing with her parents and 4 younger siblings on the Shawnee Twin Lakes, not far from her home in Earlsboro. Her brother, Randall Garton, states that their family was very close and often went fishing together. After spending the day fishing, the parents took the younger siblings home while Randall drove Melody back to the house she shared with her husband, 20-year-old Paul Richard Jones, on Benson Park Road. Randall said that when he dropped his sister off around 10:30 p.m., he noticed the door was ajar and the lights were on inside the home as Melody went inside. She has never been heard from again. Randall often slept over at the couple's home, but that night he didn't. The following morning, Melody did not show up for her job at the Dairy Queen in Seminole, Oklahoma. The Dairy Queen called Melody's mother, Carol Garton, to try to locate her. Her mother then went to Melody's house to check on her. When Carol walked into the home, she discovered her son-in-law, Paul, had been stabbed to death in the bedroom. She couldn't find Melody anywhere. All of her belongings, including her purse and eyeglasses, which she always wore because she was legally blind, were still there. The contents of her purse were dumped on the floor, and the couple's car was parked in the driveway. There were no signs of forced entry. There was a 12-gauge shotgun at the foot of the bed that the couple normally kept in the corner of the bedroom. Carol then went searching for her daughter outside. When she couldn't find her, she called the Potawatomi Sheriff's Office. Undersheriff Travis Palmer stated that when the police arrived, they did not find any signs of a robbery or a domestic dispute. Family members say police reported that nothing was missing from the home. Carol pulled Melody's siblings out of school that afternoon to break the news. Melody's youngest sister, Rebecca Cox, was just 11 years old at the time. Rebecca said she and her siblings continue to keep the search going. Their mother and father passed away in 1992 and February 2014, respectively. She says she wants closure for her siblings and wants to be able to bury Melody next to their mother. Melody's family is convinced that whoever murdered Paul also kidnapped Melody. Her family reported no strange behavior from Melody and stated that her marriage with Paul was healthy and strong. Authorities have stated they have no reason to believe that Melody was involved in Paul's murder. No suspects have been named in either Paul's murder or Melody's disappearance, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. 23-year-old Darien Michelle Hudson went missing from Stillwater, Oklahoma, on October 22, 2017. She was previously a college student at Langston University, where she played softball and had worked as a server at Chili's restaurant for 2 years. Stephanie Hudson, Darien's mother, said she last contacted her family on October 21, 2017, when she said she wanted to move back home to Wichita, Kansas. For days later, Darien's friends contacted her mother, saying they couldn't find her. Darien's parents drove to Stillwater the next day, on October 28, 2017, and went straight to the police department. However, they couldn't file a police report because it hadn't been 48 hours yet since they knew of her disappearance. So they began canvassing her neighborhood and her home in the 500 block of West 5th Street. They found her door open, the light on, and dishes in the sink, but there were no obvious signs of foul play. Darien's cell phone and other belongings were left behind at the home. About a month after Darien was last seen, a man tried to use her credit card at a hotel in Oklahoma City, and the police were alerted. They traced the man, who said he found the card in a purse he stole from a construction site in Stillwater. At the time, St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church was under construction at McElroy Road and Country Club Road, northwest of Stillwater. The man said he had seen Darien's purse hanging from a drainage pipe and took it. The police visited the construction site and spoke to numerous workers there, 2 of whom said they had seen a woman matching Darien's description in October, after her initial disappearance. The woman was sitting on the ground in a wooded area south of the church. When the 2 workers went to check on her, she just looked at them blankly. They told their boss, and a group of workers went to talk to the woman again, but she still would not engage with them. A man who lived near the church told police he saw her later that day talking with his grandchildren as she came out of the woods. Another nearby resident saw her sitting on construction equipment on the evening of October 26th, acting as if she was waiting for someone to give her a ride. Police interviewed as many workers at the construction site as they could, but reaching all of them was nearly impossible due to the numerous contractors and subcontractors and poor records of who was there. In early December 2017, after the credit card tip led them to the wooded area, police brought in dogs and drones to search for Darien, but they only found her sweatshirt and wallet. Darien's family believes that she may have been going through a mental health crisis at the time of her disappearance. She had recently suffered a miscarriage, broken up with her boyfriend, and lost her cherished dog, Zig. She also didn't have a vehicle at the time of her disappearance. She was typically very active on social media, but there has been no activity since she went missing. Her mother, Stephanie Hudson, said she hopes anyone who knows of Darien's whereabouts will do the right thing and come forward. As of today, her case remains unsolved. Amber Renee Barker was born on October 14, 1987, and was nicknamed Ambi. She was last seen on December 18, 1997, at approximately 6 p.m. in her hometown of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, at the age of 10. She was a fourth-grade student at James Monroe Elementary School at the time of her disappearance. Her mom spoke to her on the phone while she was at a friend's home and told her to come home. She left her friend's home and was last seen riding her blue 10-speed bicycle in the 3000 block of Northwest 40th Street at the time. She never arrived home and has never been heard from again. The day after her disappearance, her bicycle was found near Northwest 20th Street and Drexel Boulevard, undamaged, leaning against a tree in Denniston Park, 1 mile from her home. Amber's sweater, shoes, 1 sock, and a ring were found along Drexel Boulevard and Northwest 12th Street the next day, December 20th. One of her shoes was a block away from the other one. Investigators stated that blood, hair, and fiber evidence was discovered near Amber's possessions. There were blue fibers and vomit on her sweater. There was also a small amount of blood on her shoe, but the blood spot was so small that authorities could not link it to any specific person. Authorities were able to form a partial DNA profile for an unknown man from the evidence on her sweater. The fibers were blue and are believed to be from the interior of the suspect's vehicle. Amber's brother-in-law, Daniel John Smith, was previously convicted of attempted kidnapping in 1995. He admitted that he had assaulted a woman in Oklahoma City while he was intoxicated and tried to steal her car keys. The woman said he also tried to rape her. Daniel pleaded guilty and was sentenced to a 5-year deferred prison sentence and 4 months at a boot camp. Police had been summoned to another of Amber's sister's homes in November 1997, approximately 1 month before Amber disappeared. Her sister claimed that Daniel hit her after she refused to have sexual relations with him. He was given a citation by authorities but was not arrested. He was allegedly at Amber's residence when she called her mother to say she was returning home. He left the residence immediately afterward and headed west, the same direction Amber was coming from. Daniel was questioned about Amber's disappearance the day after she went missing, and police and FBI agents wanted to interview him further, but he committed suicide. He was found hanged from a tree in Ray Trent Park in Dale City, Oklahoma, at 11:30 p.m. on December 22, 1997, 4 days after Amber was last seen. He was also wanted for a probation violation in connection with a kidnapping conviction in November 1996 in Oklahoma City. Daniel was not labeled as a suspect at the time, and authorities simply said they wanted to question him regarding Amber's case. Sadly, one of Amber's sisters died in 2013, and her mother died in February 2014. Both went to their graves never knowing what happened to Amber. Foul play is suspected due to the circumstances involved in her case, and as of today, her case remains unsolved. The case of the Kyoto Animation Studio Massacre. On the morning of July 18, 2019, thousands of Japanese people in the city of Kyoto were surprised in the middle of their usual morning activities by a very unusual event. That morning, out of nowhere, the entire city could hear the sound of multiple ambulances and fire trucks racing through Kyoto with their sirens blaring, startling the entire population. Most Japanese who witnessed the massive mobilization of ambulances and patrols couldn't help but wonder what could be the cause of this, while simultaneously thinking that whatever it was, it had to be something serious because all these vehicles seemed to be heading to the same location, disregarding the usual heavy traffic in Kyoto mid-morning, causing all cars and bicycles on the road to give way to the authorities. By 11 a.m. on this summer morning, it became apparent to the population that indeed all this professional equipment was heading to the same building. Emergency services had received multiple calls reporting an explosion heard around 10:30 in the morning, and the worst part was that the building was reported to be engulfed in flames. As the fire quickly spread throughout the first floor, most of the people inside couldn't escape the flames. This place was an office complex belonging to the company Kyoto Animation, an animation studio founded in 1981 that had produced various anime and manga novels of all kinds. Throughout its history, it has released great works that have captivated both Japanese and international audiences due to its high production standards. Alerted by the calls they had received, which evidenced the severity of the situation, the emergency services instructed all available personnel to arrive at the scene as quickly as possible. When they arrived at the building, the situation looked much worse than expected. Several neighbors who lived nearby were observing the scene from what they thought was a safe distance while they waited for the firefighters and paramedics. The scene of the fire was, to put it mildly, disheartening. The flames enveloped the entire building and leaked out of the windows, creating long tongues of fire that immediately hindered the efforts of the firefighters trying to contain the fire and rescue those who were still trapped inside what had become a deadly concrete trap. The police officers began to instruct the neighbors to move further away from the scene. As in many cases of fires and explosions, there was a significant possibility that the building could collapse. According to reports at the time, there were 73 company employees working there at the moment of the fire. From the moment they set foot on the street, the paramedics knew they had a lot of work to do because even the employees who had managed to escape the offices were now at the foot of the burning building, seriously injured, some unable to move or unconscious. Most of them had suffered terrible injuries and cuts while trying to exit the building. The most terrible part was that most of them had severe third-degree burns. These are classified as such because they affect the deepest layers of the skin and require immediate medical attention as they have a high risk of infection. Additionally, when a person has these burns in multiple parts of their body or almost entirely, as was the case with some of these studio workers, the chances of losing their life are very high. For this reason, it was crucial that the workers receive timely treatment, so emergency doctors began to separate the injured according to the severity of their injuries in order to assist those who needed urgent medical help. This way, the most affected individuals began to be stabilized before being transported to the hospital by ambulance. At this point, the number of severely injured people was so high that more than 30 ambulances had to be mobilized in total to transport the victims of the supposed accident. It's important to clarify that the authorities believed before arriving at the scene that this was an accidental fire. However, what was happening just a block away from the scene would give a very drastic twist to this story. Just 100 meters from the burning building, some police officers from a nearby train station were detaining a man who had been chased there by Kyoto Animation employees. The man had serious burns on his face and various parts of his body. This raised several questions because why would the authorities subdue a man who appeared to be a victim of the fire? In addition to all this, multiple witnesses were reporting to the police officers present at the scene that they had seen a man enter the animation studio around 10:30 that morning with what appeared to be bottles of gasoline. So with this and the testimonies of the survivors of the tragedy who were conscious, the authorities understood that this was an arson attack and, therefore, a mass murder. When the firefighters were able to control the fire enough to enter the building and analyze the scene, they observed that the death toll of this tragedy had risen to 34 people. Shortly after, it would increase to 36, as 2 of the injured suffering from the effects of their burns could not endure any longer and lost their lives. The man was arrested, as the same employees who had pursued him claimed that he was responsible, and the same police officers who had arrested him during his transfer to the hospital testified that this man began shouting that yes, he was the one who had caused the fire at Kyoto Animation, justifying it by saying that everyone inside deserved to die because they had stolen his work without giving him any recognition. Once at the hospital, the first thing known was that the suspect's name was Shinji Aoba, and he was 41 years old. He had many injuries covering his entire body from the fire he allegedly caused. Once his wounds had healed enough for him to be kept in a cell without dying from an infection, a lengthy interrogation awaited him so that the entire country and the world would have an idea of what motivated him to commit such a horrible crime. Not much is known about this man's childhood, as his parents were born in a small village. Shinji's maternal grandfather was an honorable man who had taken on 2 jobs simultaneously to support his family. He mainly worked transporting goods by cart to Tokyo. He was considered a very kind and hardworking man until one day he was diagnosed with advanced cancer and, unable to afford the treatment that would save him, he made the decision to take his own life to avoid burdening his family with the responsibility of helping him. Shinji's mother would meet the man who would become the father of her children during her adolescence. The problem arose because this man was almost 17 years older than her when they met, and it was known that he was married at the time. As a result, the woman's family strongly disapproved of their relationship, which is a very serious matter in Japan. as Japanese society places a significant emphasis on appearances. However, against all odds, she escaped from her parents' home, never to return. After running away, she started working in a factory near Kyoto, and eventually, she got married to the older man. The couple had 3 children, of whom there is only information available about Shinji and his sister. After leading what seemed to be a relatively normal life, it appears that Shinji's mother wanted some excitement and began an affair with a much younger man than her husband. When she was caught, she left home, leaving her husband, who earned a living as a taxi driver, completely alone and responsible for their 3 children. This continued to be the family's normal life until 1999, when a car accident left the father paralyzed. He was subsequently fired from the taxi company where he worked, leaving the man, who was already struggling to make ends meet, without the possibility of working to pay rent and provide food for his 3 children. Faced with this overwhelming pressure and distress, the man made the tragic decision to end it all. Despite all this, up to a certain point, Shinji had led a relatively normal life in his youth. Nothing out of the ordinary happened during his high school years, and he even worked part-time as a document clerk for the government. After graduating, Shinji continued to work part-time at a supermarket, and when he reached his 20s, he decided to move to another city. Everything seemed to be going relatively well until his mother's disappearance and his father's death, which slowly caused his life to crumble. The young man increasingly lacked motivation to move forward, and just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, life dealt him another blow. Shinji's sister, about whom little information is available, was almost at the point of losing hope. On that day, this woman visited a temple in the city, where she started talking to a priest about all the pain she had suffered in recent years. She then prayed for the repose of her father's soul before leaving the temple without saying a word. The next day after this visit, her lifeless body was found in a hostel near the temple she had visited, and she was determined to be the cause of her own tragic ending. After his sister's death, Shinji's life began to spiral downhill. His mental and economic problems led him to commit a robbery in 2012, where he managed to escape with around 20,000 yen in his pocket. However, he was arrested shortly afterward and subsequently sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Upon his release, Shinji became a complete social outcast. Nobody wanted anything to do with him. He had no family or friends, and he struggled to maintain any relationships due to his violent temper. This isolation led him to withdraw completely into his apartment. Like a significant portion of the Japanese population, Shinji loved manga and anime. Since childhood, he had dreamed of becoming a manga writer. Faced with a bleak future and difficulties finding employment, Shinji decided to pursue his dream. He began writing light novels and drawing manga panels. At this point, Shinji's story intersects with that of Kyoto Animation, a company with an excellent reputation not only in Japan but also internationally. Kyoto Animation's specialty is depicting the wonders and dilemmas of everyday life. In other words, they create works with characters that look childlike or relatable, making it easy for viewers to connect with them quickly. However, they often incorporate plot twists that can leave you in tears. Every year, this animation company holds a manga and novel writing contest, where enthusiasts submit their works in the hopes of getting them published or adapted by the studio or even turned into a big screen production. In 2018, Shinji submitted one of his novels for the contest, following all the specified steps. However, despite constantly checking his email for responses, he received no reply from the animation studio. As the days passed, 40-year-old Shinji felt that his hope of becoming a successful manga writer was slipping through his fingers. Several months later, on one of those afternoons when all Shinji did was watch anime and play video games, he started watching an anime produced by Kyoto Animation. The show told the story of high school students who were involved in long-distance shooting sports. That very afternoon, Shinji felt humiliated because he realized that his idea had been stolen. Yes, you heard it right. A giant studio worth millions of dollars had allegedly stolen his story, without giving him the slightest credit. Maybe they didn't steal his entire manga idea, but they had apparently lifted a scene directly from his work. Shinji was outraged because he believed that in the submission he had sent to Kyoto Animation, there was a rather inconsequential scene in which the anime's protagonists were in a supermarket buying discounted meat. According to him, this scene was identical to one in an episode of the show that had aired that week. The scene was quite generic and nothing out of the ordinary. However, likely due to his unstable mental state and isolation, Shinji couldn't stop obsessing over the idea that his idea had been stolen. He was filled with anger, wondering how they could have not even bothered to respond to his contest submission and had apparently taken advantage of his creativity without giving him the slightest credit. In reality, according to the studio, Shinji's novel submission had not passed the first elimination round conducted by the contest's judges, which was why they hadn't bothered to contact him. Nevertheless, from the very beginning, Shinji demonstrated that he wasn't mentally well and acted on the belief that he had been personally attacked and blatantly robbed. All of this brings us to July 14, 2019, 4 days before the fire. 9 months earlier, Shinji had sent anonymous threats to Kyoto Animation, threatening them with death. Over 200 emails had been sent, and although employees had reported this to the police, nothing could be done because the emails were encrypted and Shinji had waited for them to let their guard down. On that Sunday, a neighbor heard Shinji starting to hit the shared wall between their apartments. These two lived in apartments where every sound from the other side could be heard. Shinji, among them, used to be the noisiest, and they would occasionally bang on the walls to request silence from one another. However, this time, it turned out that the neighbor from the apartment above was moving, and consequently, they were the cause of the noise. The neighbor went to knock on Shinji's door, intending to explain that he wasn't the one making the noise and to please stop banging on the wall. Before he had a chance to speak, Shinji angrily opened the door, grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, and yelled at him, "You're making too much noise. Shut up or I'll kill you." Faced with this aggression, all of the neighbor's feelings turned to horror. From Shinji's demeanor, it was evident that he was perfectly capable of carrying out his threat. Without hesitation, he left the scene and called the police to report the assault. However, when the officers arrived at Shinji's apartment, he was already gone. It seems that this incident was the spark that would lead Shinji to commit his final act. The next day, Shinji took a bullet train to travel to Tokyo. He stayed in a hotel and then, on Tuesday, headed to Kyoto, his final destination, where he stayed in another hotel. Several security cameras captured him in the areas near the animation studio. Several neighbors also remembered him clearly after the incident because Shinji wore the same red t-shirt and light jeans for all 4 days. Shinji spent several hours walking until he stopped at a store and bought a shopping cart. He then proceeded to a gas station where he bought 10 gallons of gasoline. With these supplies, Shinji stashed the cart and went to sleep, ready to carry out his evil plan early the next morning. On July 18, 2019, Shinji returned to the animation studio building around 10:30 in the morning, carrying his containers filled with gasoline. Upon entering, he blocked the 12 emergency exits and began to douse the studio with gasoline, taking advantage of the building's limited security, as such incidents are quite rare in Japan. Once everything was ready, Shinji struck a match and everything started to burn. When the first people realized there was a fire, they attempted to escape through the emergency exits, but they were blocked. They ran towards the central exit where Shinji was present, still holding a gasoline container, and he began to douse the employees trying to escape while saying the word, "Die." This caused many people to run out into the street engulfed in flames. In just a moment, smoke had already reached the second floor of the building, and for those inside, it was too late to evacuate without suffering injuries. The building was completely engulfed in smoke in less than 2 minutes, making it difficult to breathe, and gradually, the animation studio workers began to lose consciousness due to the lack of oxygen. Most of the company's employees were on the top floor because the attack occurred during a meeting with executives from another company. It's unclear if Shinji planned this to claim more victims, but unfortunately, that day there were more people in the building than usual. To make matters worse, shortly after, an explosion rocked the building, causing the flames to burst through the windows and doors of the studio. The police believe that the combination of air and flames led to the explosion. As the fire grew, people inside the building tried to escape the flames. The majority of the victims, specifically 19 of them, were found on the third floor near the stairs leading to the emergency exit on the roof. These individuals unknowingly ended up on the staircase, which acted like an oven. After causing this hellish scene, Shinji accidentally set himself on fire with the same gasoline he had used to try to burn his victims. This led him to flee the scene, but an employee of Kyoto Animation did not accept this and started to chase him. Eventually, they all ended up at a train station located 100 meters from where Shinji was finally apprehended by 2 police officers from the same station. The fire was completely extinguished after 5 hours of immense efforts by the police and firefighters. It was at this point that the authorities were able to accurately count the victims of the incident. In this attack, 36 people lost their lives, while another 34 were left with serious injuries. Of the deceased, 28 died from carbon monoxide poisoning, 6 succumbed to their burns, and 2 passed away while receiving medical treatment at the hospital. It was reported that 2/3 of the fatal victims who worked at the studio were women, as Kyoto Animation was known for hiring women in almost all of its animation positions. After spending 10 months in the hospital, Shinji was officially arrested and processed. There were concerns about his physical health, and questions arose as to whether he would be physically capable of enduring the lengthy trial schedule ahead of him. His hospital treatment had taken so long because he had suffered burns on 90% of his body. In such cases, skin donors are crucial, but the Japanese authorities correctly prioritized obtaining donors for the victims. As for Shinji, he had no other option but to accept artificial skin, becoming the first person to undergo such a significant surgery of this kind without using real skin transplants. The judicial processes in Japan are known to be slow, as they usually involve multiple stages before a clear conviction is obtained. Since the trials for Shinji began, he underwent numerous psychiatric and psychological evaluations to determine if he was mentally healthy at the time of the crime. The results were somewhat mixed because, on one hand, it was clear that Shinji's brain did not function normally, but on the other hand, he was aware of what he was doing, making it difficult to predict what sentence he would receive. The decision had to be something between the death penalty and life imprisonment. The world was deeply affected by this crime, especially the animation industry. After the fire, an American anime licensor launched a successful GoFundMe campaign with a goal of $750,000 to assist the studio and the victims' families. In less than 24 hours, they raised over $1 million for this purpose. Even the then Prime Minister of Japan expressed condolences to the families, a figure many may recognize as he was assassinated a couple of years later. The president of Kyoto Animation mentioned that he did not plan to rebuild the studio in the same location as it would be traumatic and bring bad memories for the employees. Instead, he considered demolishing the remains of the studio to create a park with a monument dedicated to the staff and the local community. Today, most of Kyoto Animation's employees have returned to work, this time in the company's second studio. One of these employees is a veteran manga artist who has been working at Kyoto Animation since the 1980s. He returned to work after the incident, having recovered from the injuries he sustained. He mentioned that he feels better when he is working than resting. He also expressed his intention to make his future work a tribute to those who perished. Another significant detail worth mentioning is that, as a result of this tragedy, Japan decided to implement a new law. It requires citizens to present identification and provide reasons for their gasoline purchases when buying it in lighters or containers. Jesse Warren Ross was born on February 18, 1987 in Kansas and nicknamed Opie. He was 19 years old and a sophomore communications major at the University of Missouri at Kansas City at the time of his disappearance. On November 18, 2006, he had traveled to Chicago, Illinois to participate in a 4-day college mock United Nations convention with 13 other students. On the last night of the conference on November 21, 2006, Jesse attended a dance hosted by conference organizers and a party in a room where alcohol was served at the Sheraton Tower Hotel. Shortly before 12:30 a.m., he would join a meeting with the mock UN Security Council. He was last seen on surveillance camera leaving the meeting and walking out of the building at the Sheraton Towers Hotel in the 300 block of East North Water Street in Chicago at 2:30 a.m. He never made it back to his hotel room and hasn't been seen or heard from since. He did not appear to be intoxicated when he left. The walk from that hotel to the one he was staying in was only a half a mile apart, well lit and monitored by cameras, but none of the cameras recorded Ross. Investigators initially speculated that Jesse, who had been reportedly drinking, might have fallen into the Chicago River, which runs next to the hotel, although a friend of his who was at the meeting stated Jesse didn't appear too intoxicated. The Chicago River was in the opposite direction of the hotel where he was staying, so that would explain why surveillance cameras didn't record Jesse walking to his hotel. Authorities conducted an extensive search in both hotels and its neighborhood, collected videos, interviewed the hotel staff, and sent divers into the Chicago River, but none brought up any clues. The pedestrian esplanade along the river also had a 4-foot-tall iron security barrier. Ross was well liked at college and was known as a driven, enthusiastic young man. He did an unpaid internship at a Kansas City radio station 95.7 The Vibe prior to his disappearance and was so successful that he was promoted to a paid position. He was a popular personality on the station's Shorty and the Boys Morning Show, where he was known by his radio name, Opie Cunningham. He was not having any personal problems at the time he went missing, and his loved ones are puzzled by his disappearance. There has been no activity on his cell phone or credit card since he was last seen, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Kiara Michelle Coles was born on September 24, 1992. In February 2018, she lived in Chicago, Illinois, and worked as a letter carrier for the Charles Hayes Post Office, and she was also a part-time Lyft driver. That year, she got her own apartment and purchased a new car. She was also about 3 months pregnant with her first child and was very excited about becoming a mother. Kiara and her boyfriend had been together for 5 years. However, he had another partner at the time who he had previously had 3 children with, and she is said to have been pregnant again at the same time as Kiara. He also had another child with a third woman. Kiara had requested off from work on October for personal reasons. She was last seen near 81st and Vernon in the Chatham neighborhood of Chicago on October 2, 2018. A local resident's surveillance video showed her leaving her home, but instead of getting into her car, she walked past it across the street and out of frame. She was dressed in her postal uniform, but she never arrived at the post office and she had actually caught in sick that day. She has never been heard from again. Throughout that day and the next, her mother, Karen Phillips, kept calling Kiara but received no answer. As all her calls were going directly to voicemail, she at first thought that her daughter's phone had run out of battery. Her mother became concerned and called Kiara's sister to ask if she'd heard from her. Kiara had not been active on Snapchat or social media, which was unusual. Her sister contacted Kiara's boyfriend and her mother called the Chicago Police Department and asked them to perform a welfare check. She was not at home, but her car was found parked on the block where she lived, with her purse, cell phone, prenatal vitamins, and lunch bags still inside. There is a lot of speculation regarding the exact day that Kiara disappeared. This is because most news outlets have reported she was last seen on October 2nd, while her mother says she went missing 1 day later on October 3rd. The miscommunication comes from the fact that she was last seen in person on the 2nd, while the surveillance footage found would potentially show her last movements the following day. According to reports, Kiara's boyfriend, his girlfriend, and their children left Illinois shortly after her disappearance. Investigators have not revealed if he's been questioned in connection to the case, and the family has shared that he has not attended any vigils nor kept in contact with them. There is much debate on whether the woman seen in their surveillance video is actually Kiara. Some people believe the clothing she's wearing is a postal service uniform, while others feel it doesn't match what is typically worn by postal workers. There's also a question regarding why Kiara would be wearing her work uniform if she had called in sick that day. A representative with the USPS Inspection Service has publicly shared that the organization does not believe the woman in the footage to be Kiara, as there are other postal workers who live on the same block. In the meantime, her mother Karen Phillips and her father Joseph Cole have been very active in the search for answers. Police stated they had a pretty good idea of what transpired and that they believed Kiara met with foul play. They have multiple persons of interest in her case, but as of today, this case remains unsolved. Mark Allen Miller was born on September 6, 1960 and lived and worked in Rockford, Illinois. He graduated from North High School in 1979 and was a native of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. He was one of 5 brothers and is described as a very social person and a dedicated worker. He worked as a catering captain at the Clock Tower Resort and Conference Center. He was 48 years old when he was last seen on March 12, 2009 when he clocked out at work at 1:21 p.m. Mark had become increasingly uncomfortable with the living situation he had with his roommate at the Windsor Apartments on the corner of Whitman Street and North Main Street. The day of his disappearance, Mark told a friend he was going to ask his roommate of 2 years to move out. Later, he called his friend and said he had gone through with it and it had gone better than expected. Mark's roommate, Manuel Vasquez Rivera, was the last person known to have seen him. Authorities are interested in locating him so that they can find out what, if anything, he knows about Mark's disappearance. A few days after his disappearance, his silver Chrysler New Yorker was found abandoned in the 1900 block of Harlem Boulevard, about a mile from his home. They found no evidence of a struggle at his home or vehicle. A small briefcase containing his important personal documents that Mark kept with him at all times in his vehicle was missing and has not been located. It is said that he kept it away from his roommate Manuel to keep him from accessing his personal information. He enjoyed walking by the Rock River and his car was found near there, but a search of the river turned up no signs of him. As of today, the case remains unsolved. Dalton Alexander Mazerchic was born on April 29, 1995 and lived in Streator, Illinois. On March 26, 2003, 7-year-old Dalton was waiting outside his home for a church van to take him to Bible school at the Church of the Nazarene sometime between 6:15 and 6:45 p.m. His sister saw him on the porch about 6:45 p.m. when she left to go to a friend's house to wait for the same church van. He came back inside the house between 7 and 7:15 p.m. to say that he was still waiting on the van. The church van never arrived because the driver was out of town and unfortunately the family was not notified. At 7:45 p.m., his sister returned home and asked where he was. Dalton was missing and the police were notified. K-9s tracked him from his home to the middle of the street and stopped. The next day, his body was found by a fisherman in the Vermilion River 3 miles from his home. Police also found a hammer that was used in his death. Agents from the Streator Police Department, Livingston County Sheriff's Department, and Illinois State Police interviewed dozens of people and followed up on hundreds of leads to identify the person responsible for Dalton's murder. It was reported that there were 31 registered sex offenders in the immediate area at the time of his abduction. As of today, this case remains unsolved. Sarah Elizabeth Avon was born on January 6, 1975. On July 21, 1981, at 6 years old, she was with her younger sister and other neighborhood friends at the end of Richard Street in Joliet, Illinois. Sarah had an argument with another child and then walked across the street away from the group. This was the last time she was seen. She was reported missing by her family at approximately 9 p.m. that evening. Searches for her produced no trace of her whereabouts. Many volunteers searched the area surrounding the Avon home and the street she disappeared from. A quarry was also dragged in search of Sarah, but nothing was found. A former neighbor of the Avon family, Ernest Wilson Sr., died in Arkansas in January 1993. After he died, his nephew, Robert Today, went to the police and said Wilson had made a deathbed revelation about Sarah's disappearance. Wilson was unable to speak at this point, but he drew a distinctive triangular shape on a piece of paper and put a circle inside the triangle. This drawing stuck out to the family because it resembled the triangular-shaped lot where Wilson had lived in 19, according to Robert. Wilson's son had allegedly implicated himself and another boy in Sarah's death. In 1981, his son was 15 years old and was known to be mentally disturbed. Robert said that when he had a conversation with the nephew, he admitted to sexually molesting Sarah on the night she disappeared, but stated that he was upstairs when Sarah was killed. Investigators and Robert believed that Wilson found Sarah deceased and that he buried Sarah's body on his property so that he could protect his son. A witness has backed up the story, saying that in 1981, when he was a teenager, he went outside during the night and saw Wilson dig in a deep hole in the yard with a shovel. The hole was chest deep. When the teen asked Wilson why he was digging, Wilson said he was digging a hole to transplant his sunflower plants. However, that made no sense because his plants were flourishing where they were. The teen knew nothing of the disappearance of Sarah at the time, so he didn't suspect anything. On another night, the same witness saw Wilson operating his bulldozer, pushing mounds of dirt near Hickory Creek and knocking down trees at the junction of Hickory Creek and Spring Creek. Later, the Wilson family moved their above-ground swimming pool near the location where Wilson had used his bulldozer to pile up dirt. After getting the tip from Robert, police dug up the vacant lot on Miller Avenue where Wilson's house once stood. The search turned up nothing and was called off after a couple days. However, one government official involved with the excavation believed that the area that was being excavated was too small and too shallow for them to be sure Sarah's body wasn't buried on the lot. The man who saw Wilson digging was quoted as saying the hole was chest deep and thought authorities were not excavating deep enough during the search. The man even brought this to their attention, but they paid no attention to his statements. Sarah's body has never been found. The witness said he now wonders whether Wilson may have moved Sarah Avon's body from the initial spot where he saw Wilson digging with a hand shovel in the middle of the night. The witness emphasized that too much time has elapsed for him to say that the digging occurred on the night that Sarah Avon went missing. A woman who grew up in the neighborhood believes the authorities back in 1993 misinterpreted a drawing of a triangle provided by Wilson during his apparent deathbed confession. She insists the triangle wasn't a drawing of Wilson's yard. She said the triangle symbolized the island behind the Wilson property where Hickory Creek and Spring Creek come together. In her opinion, Sarah Avon's body is likely located in this area of woods. In February 2004, police dug underneath an old garage on Noel Road, south of Joliet, hoping to find Sarah's remains. They did find some clothing, but they could not find any evidence relating to Sarah's case. Sarah's sister, Marie, who was 5 years old when her sister disappeared, states that the case remains open and her family is still hopeful. As of today, this case remains unsolved. The case of Marian Bachmeier. Marian Bachmeier was born on June 3, 1950, in Saarstedt, West Germany. Her family ended up there following the public persecution and scrutiny her father faced for being a former official of the German National Socialist Party. During World War II, he was a member of the notorious SS. As a result, Marianne was raised in a very conservative home by deeply religious tutors. It's said that she never had a happy childhood due to a lack of close relationship with her parents. Her father was authoritarian, abusive, and an alcoholic, often spending more time at a bar near their home than with his family. Marianne's mother was also distant, rarely speaking or spending time with her daughter. The situation worsened due to her father's drinking, which increased his aggression towards the family. This ended with the parents' divorce and the father leaving the house. Marianne thought she could finally be free and happy, but soon her mother remarried another abusive man. Unfortunately, instead of Marianne and her mother uniting against the man, they both turned against Marianne, blaming her for the family's problems. This broke their relationship, and Marianne, seen as a troublesome teenager, was eventually kicked out of the house. During her adolescence, Marianne faced multiple assaults from different men, leading to the birth of her first child at just 16. She was forced to give the baby up for adoption due to lack of resources and because the baby's father abandoned her. 2 years later, Marianne got pregnant again by her then abusive boyfriend. Despite the circumstances, she wanted to keep the baby, but before the child's birth, she experienced another traumatic assault at a nightclub. Her boyfriend left her and she gave up this second child for adoption as well. Later, Marianne dropped out of school and sought work to support herself. She started working at a bar named Tipesa, where she met the manager, and after some time they became a couple. At 22, she became pregnant with her third child and felt ready to raise the baby with some resources and a home. However, her then boyfriend disagreed with her decision, ending their relationship. Marianne, firm in her choice, decided to raise her daughter Anna alone, despite her parents' demands to give her up for adoption like her previous children. After Anna's birth, Marian vowed to be a good mother and underwent a tubal ligation, a common practice at the time to prevent overpopulation. Mary and Anna lived together in Lübeck, Germany, and despite challenges, they made it through. Indeed, Mary was happy because her daughter was the only person in her life who did not intend to harm her, unlike her parents or ex-partners. However, raising Anna alone meant Mary had to take her to work at the bar, so she could only attend to her daughter during her few breaks. Years later, people close to Mary would say that she treated Anna like a little adult and expected her to take care of many things on her own from a young age. Anna often slept in the bar while Mary was working, and a friend described Anna as a very vibrant and creative child who unfortunately never had a pleasant family life, as she only occasionally saw her father at the bar. Some stories also mention that Mary worked late into the night and then slept all day, leaving her 7-year-old daughter alone for much of the day. Anna used this time to play around the neighborhood alone, greeting people and playing with their pets. It was even mentioned that Mary was aware of her problematic lifestyle and sometimes contemplated the idea of giving Anna up for adoption. This leads us to May 5, 1980, where it is unclear exactly what happened that morning between Anna and Mary. Some say they argue because Anna woke up in a bad mood and stubbornly did not want to go to school but wanted to play in the park, which Mary did not allow. There's another version where Anna asked permission from her mother to skip school to play in the park with friends, and Mary eventually let her go, not suspecting her daughter's real intentions to play elsewhere. Regardless, Anna was playing outside when the ensuing events turned into a tragedy in Marian's life. When Mary returned home later that day, she found it strange not to find her daughter anywhere, but decided to wait a few more hours for her return. As time passed and Anna did not return, Mary started searching the neighborhood. She asked Anna's friends and locals if they knew anything about her daughter, but nobody knew anything. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. So, Mary reported this anomaly to the police. The next day, a very upset and nervous woman arrived at the police. It seemed that this man, Klaus Grabowski, 35 years old, was overcome with guilt after the act and couldn't find peace. He ended up confessing in detail what happened to his girlfriend. This caused a great argument, after which he left, confused, to go to a bar for a beer. His girlfriend took this opportunity to go to the police station to report him. The truth was that Anna had been abducted by Klaus, who owned a butcher shop near Marian's house. Anna had gone there intending to play because the man had promised her that she could play with his cats whenever she wanted to visit. Innocently, Anna went and rang the doorbell. Klaus received her and kept her in his house for several hours, assaulting her multiple times until finally, to prevent the child from confessing the facts, he ended her life by suffocation with a pair of his girlfriend's stockings. Klaus Grabowski had a history of criminal activities and had previously been convicted for the assault of 2 young girls. He was known to have a troubled past. In 1973, he attacked a 6-year-old girl and was charged with attempted murder. 2 years later, he faced charges for these crimes, leading to a psychological evaluation. The results indicated he had an abnormal sexual instinct and significantly limited capacity to control it. Consequently, he was sent to a psychological treatment center instead of prison. A few years later, Klaus was offered the option of undergoing a controversial chemical castration procedure in exchange for early release, which he readily accepted. This procedure involved administering drugs to reduce libido and testosterone levels, reducing the likelihood of reoffending. Klaus preferred this option over returning to a mental health facility. It was a common practice for offenders of such crimes, often resulting in reduced sentences under the assumption that they no longer posed a societal threat. Despite the reversibility of this procedure, Klaus was released soon after undergoing it, without subsequent psychological evaluations. 2 years later, he underwent hormonal treatment to reverse the chemical castration, increasing his testosterone levels. This treatment was approved by the court under the pretext that he wanted to start a family with his girlfriend and lead a normal life, thus misleading everyone about his true nature. On the day of the incident, authorities quickly headed to Klaus's residence, but couldn't find him. He had taken Anna's body and left a note for his girlfriend, asking her to meet him at a bar that night to discuss the situation. The police took this opportunity to wait for Klaus at the bar and arrested him upon his arrival. After his arrest, Klaus claimed he had no intention of inappropriately touching Anna. He despicably defended himself by alleging that the child tried to seduce and extort him, and fear of returning to jail drove him to end her life. He claimed Anna had threatened to tell her mother he had inappropriately touched her, a claim he insisted was false and made with the intent to extort money from him. Klaus revealed he had hidden the body in a cardboard box near a canal. When the police informed Mary and about her daughter's whereabouts and tragic demise, she was devastated. However, the trial brought further anguish. Mary was forced to hear testimonies and descriptions about her life and Anna's, suggesting that Anna was practically raised on the streets and that such an incident was inevitable due to Marian's negligence as a bar waitress who worked late nights and neglected her daughter. This left Mary heartbroken and furious, particularly tormented by the possibility that Anna's killer might not receive the maximum penalty due to potential claims of mental health issues, which could allow him to avoid prison. Consequently, Mary silently began to devise a plan to avenge her daughter's death, regardless of the consequences. During the trial, Klaus Grabowski repeatedly claimed that Anna had seduced and extorted him for money, insisting that his actions were driven by the fear of returning to jail. His defense also centered around the idea that the hormonal treatment he was undergoing significantly affected him and led to violent outbursts. Frustrated and angered by these lies, Mary decided to buy a gun and secretly practice shooting. Every time Mary attended the trial, her displeasure was evident, especially when she heard statements that defamed her 7-year-old daughter. At one point, she expressed clear anger, unable to bear listening to Klaus and his lawyer's fabrications. However, the trial took a dramatic turn on its third day, March 6, 1981. Mary arrived at the courtroom later than usual, entering with an expressionless face. She walked with an upright posture, her hands in the pockets of her white coat. Unbeknownst to others, she had managed to bypass the strict security measures of the judicial establishment with a pistol in her pocket. As the judge and others in the courtroom carried on with the proceedings, Klaus, with his back to Marianne, faced the judge. At this moment, Marianne stood still, her nerves palpable. She seized the opportunity to act when Klaus stood up to give his statement. Marianne pulled out the pistol and fired 7 shots, 6 of which struck Klaus, causing him to collapse. The precision of her shots was noted by many. Marianne remained expressionless throughout, slightly moving her lips as she fired. She made no attempt to flee and did not resist when the courtroom security detained her. Marianne was heard saying, "That pig killed my daughter. He shot her in the face, but I shot him in the back. I hope he's dead." Her wish was confirmed when an officer checked Klaus and declared him dead. Upon hearing this, a look of relief crossed Marianne's face, contrasting her previous expressions. However, Marianne now faced her own trial, which would not be easy to escape. Those who witnessed the incident noted that Marianne seemed to be in a trance, struggling to comprehend her actions. The forensic psychiatrist examined her, asking her to write something to analyze her handwriting and mental state. Marianne wrote, "I did it for Anna," surrounding the sentence with 7 hearts, possibly representing each year of Anna's life. The next day, German newspapers displayed Marianne's photo, dubbing her the avenging mother. The case became the most well-known instance of vigilant justice in West Germany, garnering extensive media coverage. Television crews from across Europe rushed to report on the case, highlighting its extraordinary and tragic nature. Marianne was quickly brought to trial for murder. During her trial, she testified that she was not fully aware of her actions, claiming she was in a trance and even had a dream where she saw Anna walking through the courtrooms. She also mentioned her mental health had deteriorated significantly following the events. Marianne then told a lie that likely worsened her standing with the judge. She claimed she had bought the gun to end her own life, but no one believed she hadn't premeditated her actions and practiced with the weapon before using it in court. Many people in Germany and around the world supported Marianne for taking matters into her own hands, as they felt the system had failed by previously freeing Klaus and authorizing his hormonal treatment without proper evaluation. They saw it as fair to set her free. However, There were also those who viewed Mary and as a criminal who had taken justice into her own hands in the worst possible way, labeling her a murderer. Others judged her for being an irresponsible mother who had given up her other 2 children for adoption and committed a cold-blooded crime that could have harmed others in the process. With all this controversy and mixed feelings, Marianne was charged with murder in a judicial process for the death of Klaus Grabowski on November 2, 1982. The prosecution later withdrew the charge, and after 28 days of negotiations, the jury reached a verdict. In March 1983, Marianne was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and illegal possession of a firearm, sentenced to 6 years in prison. 3 years later, the authorities reconsidered, believing she didn't deserve any sentence. Soon after, Marianne sold her life story for about 250,000 German marks in an exclusive to a news magazine, stating she did it to pay off the debts caused by the judicial process. Following the fall of the Berlin Wall, she returned to a now unified Germany after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. During this time, Marianne was interviewed by various media outlets, often placed in tense situations with questions comparing her to Klaus, as both were murderers. Despite this, she maintained her composure, stating she did what she did to ensure Klaus faced justice for his actions against the 7-year-old girl, even as he continued to spread lies about her in his final moments. Knowing her illness was terminal, Marianne asked a reporter to accompany her with a movie camera until her last moments. Marianne passed away at the age of 46 on September 17, 1996, from pancreatic cancer. She was buried next to her daughter Anna's grave in the Lübeck Cemetery. Dawn Marlene Allen was 50 years old when she went missing from Carroll, Iowa in 2011. That same year, she started going through a civil divorce with her husband, Tom Allen, after 26 years of marriage. Her 25-year-old son, Michael, had also recently passed away from suicide. Due to all the stress and tragedy in her life, she had become lonely and decided to check out an online dating site. She would meet 54-year-old James Snowvale of Rolfe, Iowa, who claimed to be separated from his wife. The two would start dating, but the relationship was not great. It was described that Dawn and James had a very tumultuous relationship. Dawn's co-workers even described James as overbearing and claimed he had once hunted her down at Walmart after she failed to answer his text messages. It was eventually discovered that James was not who he said he was. He was not actually separated from his wife, but was leading a double life and had even been deceiving several women at once. On May 5, 2011, Dawn was set to report to her job at Subway where she worked for 21 years. Her boss knew that in those 21 years, she had never been late or missed work before. So when she didn't show up, the boss knew that something was wrong immediately. Her boss would report her missing at 9:30 a.m. on May 5, 2011. Turns out, she had not been seen since May 4, 2011 about 8:30 p.m. at her home. After being reported missing, she has never been heard from again. The morning after her disappearance, her white February 2001 Chevrolet Blazer was found locked and abandoned in the parking lot of the Piranha Club in the 1200 block of Plaza Drive. It hadn't been there when the club closed at 10:30 p.m. the previous day. There were no signs of a struggle in her vehicle or at her home. Cell phone records indicate her phone was used for the last time at 3:30 a.m. on May 5th, then turned off a few hours later. On the afternoon of May 4th, 2011, one of Dawn's neighbors said he looked out the window and saw James walking down the alley next to Dawn's home. Authorities thought James might know her whereabouts and sought him for questioning. This is when they would discover James had been lying to Dawn and was unemployed even though he had told Dawn his job involved agricultural industry deliveries. On May 9th, police would track down James to a rural property in Coffee County, Kansas, where something unexpected occurred. He had no known history of violence, but about a month before he died, he indicated to his brother that something bad was going to happen. James' wife cooperated with police following his death. They said she couldn't provide many details to them about the case. Investigators believe he was involved in her case, and they also believe she may be somewhere between Coffee County and Carroll. Authorities stated that Dawn had no history of mental illness and wasn't having any problems in her life that would have led her to walk away. Police have thoroughly searched for Dawn, including the use of cadaver dogs, but have turned up nothing. Her cell phone is also missing a Samsung Acclaim from US Cellular, as well as a bright orange purse and keys to a Chevy Blazer with a key fob. Foul play is suspected in her case and as of today remains unsolved. Crystal Ann Arensdorf was born February 1st, 1981. She was last seen around 2 a.m. on July 4th, 2001 in Dubuque, Iowa at the age of 20. She and friends had celebrated the 4th of July holiday by watching the annual fireworks displayed by the river. They then decided to go to the Knicker Saloon at 2186 Central Avenue in Dubuque, is where she was last seen. For unknown reasons, the friends left without her and she began trying to find a ride to East Dubuque. However, no one saw her leave the bar and she left her car, her keys, and her money behind. She did not show up for work Thursday morning and was then reported missing by family. Robert F. Moots was employed as a bartender at Knicker Saloon in 2001. He pleaded guilty to serving alcohol to a minor in May 2002. Crystal was underage at the time of her visit to the bar. He told authorities that he and Crystal planned to share a cab to East Dubuque after her friends left her. The plans apparently changed during the evening and Crystal did not leave with him. He has not been charged in connection with her disappearance. Officials announced that Stephen and David Peacock were at the bar on July 4th. The brothers were former Dubuque residents, but at the time they lived in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. They were questioned about Crystal several times and agreed to take polygraph exams in April 2002. Authorities also seized and searched one of the Peacock's vehicles. The brothers have never been charged in connection to Crystal's case. In June 2015, Iowa Cold Cases received a tip saying David Peacock hadn't used his own vehicle the night Crystal went missing, but had instead borrowed his sister's pickup truck. In 2005, David was charged with 1 count of false imprisonment and 3 charges of battery for the attack on his girlfriend of 6 weeks. He allegedly viciously beat his girlfriend and threatened to kill her and a man he saw her talking to in her car. He was also allegedly arrested in 1993 for possession of a date rape drug. Crystal's family members said that it is uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. Authorities searched Leisure Lake in Jackson County, Iowa after a witness reported seeing a body floating in the water on July 16, 12 days after Crystal vanished. The sighting turned out to be a false alarm and no evidence was discovered at the scene. In October 2001, 3 months after she went missing, investigators eliminated her boyfriend, Tim Gerlieb, as a possible suspect in her disappearance. Dubuque police followed up on more than 500 leads, but have made no arrest in what they still consider a missing person case with a high suspicion of being criminal in nature. Authorities said that they do not believe she left of her own accord. As of today, Crystal's case remains unsolved. Martavius Tavaros Tate Johnson was born on July 6, 1994. He attended Expo High School and was a former football and basketball player for East High School in Waterloo, Iowa. He had 11 sisters and 3 brothers and was a dedicated employee of a local dry cleaner. On January 5, 2012, he was murdered at the young age of 17. Martavius and his sister went to the 500 block of Sumner Street in Waterloo at about 8 p.m. to drop off the sister's boyfriend. That is where he was involved in a verbal confrontation with some gang members. When a group walking down the street approached him and asked about his gang affiliation, he apparently laughed and cracked a joke before turning to get back inside the vehicle. He was then shot in the back and died a short time later at the Allen Hospital. Martavius's family members said they were given some details by people who were present when the shooting occurred. His family state that he was not involved in any gang activity and was far more interested in sports. They believe he was shot because of his response to the question. Waterloo police brought in a 15-year-old for questioning, but wouldn't say whether the teen was a suspect in Johnson's murder. On the 5-year anniversary of his death, police said they had possible suspects but were waiting on the right piece of information that could lead to an arrest. Martavius was sadly buried on his mother, Tanya Johnson's birthday. Years after his death, his family and friends still cannot understand how his promising life could have been taken for nothing but having made a joke. Police are still investigating his murder, But as of today, this case remains unsolved. Harry Dennis Milligan was born October 4, 1962. At the age of 21, he was a college student and a Marine Corps reservist and lived in Avery, Iowa. On Saturday, June 30, 1984, he went out with friends to the Waterworks bar in nearby Albia. People that were at the bar reported that Harry seemed in good spirits and had won some money playing cards while drinking beers. At closing time, he and some friends decided to park their cars at a library and go riding around Main Street in one vehicle. The friends reported that they all parted ways about 4:30 that morning. Harry was last seen traveling north on Main Street in Albia in his 1977 maroon Pontiac Grand Prix with Iowa license plate EIJ 244. At that time, it was believed he was heading home, but he never arrived. Harry had plans to go to a softball game later that morning, as he usually did on Sundays, and always brought the balls and bats for his team to play. When he did not show up that morning on July 1st, everyone became concerned, including his college roommate. He called Harry's home and notified his family that he wasn't there. His mother then called Harry's brother, Mark, who was also a Marine, but was stationed in California at the time, and asked if he had talked to him. He said that he hadn't and told her not to worry, that he would make it home soon. But sadly, that was not the case. Harry was reported missing that evening of July 1st. A search by authorities, family, and friends began, but there were no signs of Harry or his vehicle. An area of local water was searched with a boat using sonar equipment, but nothing was found. His family reported that he would have never left on his own. Sadly, a month after Harry's disappearance, his sister passed away. Also, his parents have since passed away, not knowing what happened to him. His brother Mark continues to seek answers in the disappearance, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Kenneth William Harker, or Kenny, was born on November 18, 1961. He was last seen in Sioux City, Iowa on October 5, 1996. He lived in the 500 block of Colin Street at the time and enjoyed working on motorcycles and playing the guitar. He was supposed to meet his mother, Marie Harker, that day, but he never showed up and she assumed he had forgotten. Kenny had suffered a brain injury a few years prior from an auto accident, leaving him disabled. He had to learn to walk and talk again and had just recently regained his independence and moved out on his own. That same day, his white 1977 Chevrolet Suburban was found abandoned on a gravel road near Sioux City by the Plymouth County Police. Its doors were open, the fuel tank was empty, and the tires were flat. His mother was unaware of the vehicle being found, continued to try and contact Kenny. On October 9th, after several days of failed attempts to contact Kenny, his mother went to his house and found it deserted. His Australian Shepherd Kilo was there and had not been fed in several days, and Kenny's medication was left behind. His mother then decided that it was time to go to the police to report him missing. She stated that Kenny was very close to his dog and took him with him most places, and it would be uncharacteristic of him to abandon the dog without making sure it would be cared for. A local mechanic and friend of Kenny's disappeared at about the same time he did. He returned home several days later after Kenny was reported missing, but suspiciously moved away from the area shortly afterwards. He had been building a Harley-Davidson motor for Kenny at the time he disappeared, but the motor disappeared as well. Friends of Kenny say that whatever happened most likely went down in the shop because they doubt Kenny would have went off very far without his dog. Kenny's mother also suspected her son's disappearance had something to do with the missing motor. The mechanic claimed that Kenny picked up the engine, but his mother Marie stated that isn't possible because he would have been over the moon and wanting her to see it. She stated that he had worked on it too long and put too much money into it to not let her know or anyone else know. The mechanic had a reputation for swindling people, and he had many enemies as a result and was considered a dangerous man. Authorities searched the man's sister's property for Kenny's remains but found nothing. The mechanic has never been charged with Kenny's disappearance. 1 week had lapsed between the time Kenny had last visited a friend and the missing person report was filed, which gave any perpetrator ample time to destroy evidence. Foul play is suspected in Kinney's disappearance, and investigators believe he may have been murdered, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. The case of the Chavez Lopez family. On the morning of December 2, 1991, in Ecatepec, Mexico, a mariachi returning from his nightly work was walking home as usual. On his way, he encountered a young boy wandering the street alone. The child was dirty, as if covered in mud, and the mariachi wondered why a child in such a state was alone on the street. He recognized the boy as the youngest son of the Chavez Lopez family, known for having one of the biggest and most spectacular houses in the Jardines de Morelos neighborhood. The mariachi's first question to the boy was why he was dirty and where his mother was. The boy, 3 years old, could walk and talk but not clearly, making it difficult to understand him. The child seemed calm, likely not understanding what had actually happened, and told the mariachi that a doctor had operated his mother at home, and then she didn't wake up again. This sounded strange to the mariachi, who realized that the boy was not covered in mud, but in blood. What had really happened was beyond the boy's limited understanding of the world, and he couldn't explain what he had witnessed. Confused, the mariachi decided to take the boy to his own home, where his wife was waiting. She knew more about the Chavez Lopez family and knew the boy's name was Alejandro. Shocked by Alejandro's appearance, she and her husband decided to go to Alejandro's house to find out why his parents had left him in such a state. Upon arriving, they noted that the house looked strange. The front door and a patio door were open, suggesting someone was inside, but the curtains were drawn and the lights were off, giving the impression that the family wasn't home or was sleeping. The couple debated entering, but felt uneasy about the vibe of the house. They decided to seek help from another neighbor who lived across from the Chavez Lopez family. By then, the situation had become a scandal among the neighbors, all of whom were wondering what was happening. Yet, none dared to enter the house until the officials arrived. In the meantime, they could only help by cleaning the boy, noticing he had a recent wound under his armpit that had stopped bleeding. Given the dried, darkened blood on the boy, initially mistaken for mud, it was inferred that whatever had happened occurred several hours earlier. Shortly after, a police patrol arrived, and the testimony of the two officers about what they saw inside conveyed the terror they felt each time they thought about it. Upon entering the house, they immediately sensed a heavy atmosphere. The main living area was dark, and no one was visible, so they decided to go upstairs where the bedrooms were located. Hearing the sound of a television in the distance, they headed towards the room it was coming from. They found the door to the room was jammed, not by the lock, but because something was blocking it from the inside. With some effort, they managed to open the door and were horrified to discover the bodies of a man and a woman blocking it. Both were on the floor, one on top of the other, in a blood-soaked room. The officers, unaccustomed to such gruesome scenes and without bullets in their guns, were left speechless and hastily exited the house. Visibly shaken, they stood for a few seconds leaning against their patrol car, and one of the officers called for backup, feeling overwhelmed by the situation. About 20 minutes later, several police patrols arrived, and the officers, equipped with flashlights, began to examine the house. They knew about the two bodies in the upstairs room, but first wanted to check the ground floor for a better understanding of what had happened. To their surprise, the rest of the house appeared orderly, contrary to their expectations of a burglary gone wrong in a high-class family's home. There were no signs of a break-in or a thief searching for valuables. Not finding any abnormalities on the ground floor and under orders not to disturb the scene before the forensic experts arrived, the officers first examined the room with the TV and the lifeless bodies. The victims were quickly identified as Alejandro and Phip Chavez Lopez, the homeowners. The crime scene was indescribable. The knife, the apparent weapon, was used multiple times on the victims, resulting in blood covering the floor, walls, and bed. A shoot print on the bed and the deseret in the room suggested that the Chavez Lopez couple had fought for their lives. Surprisingly, in the room was a bag containing credit cards, checkbooks, and jewelry, indicating that robbery was not the motive. It seemed the crime was driven by hatred towards the specific family, raising the question of who could have done this to such hardworking people, both of whom were school teachers. Everyone spoke highly of the Chavez Lopez family. Alejandro, the father, was an entrepreneurial man, though a teacher by profession. His passion was business. He was well known in the impoverished neighborhood for his large house, which stood out. He understood the importance of networking for business success, often attending meetings and parties where he made connections with influential people, helping him rise to the top of the community. 33, he already owned 2 large schools, which provided him with a good income, and he had no intention of stopping. Besides teaching, Alejandro's other passion was cars. With his experience in restoring automobiles, he aspired to establish a garage and had already acquired the land for it. Unfortunately, Alejandro could never realize this dream. His wife, Phoebe, was known for her beauty and assisted Alejandro in the administrative aspects of his businesses. She had a daughter, Lorena, from a previous relationship. Lorena, 13 years old and distinct in appearance from her siblings, was treated as Alejandro's own daughter, even taking his surname. The other children, Jasmine, 10 years old, Erica, 8 years old, and Alejandro Jr., 3 years old, were from Phoebe and Alejandro's marriage. Despite the Chavez Lopez house's spectacular exterior, it was poorly designed with an unfinished kitchen and only 1 bathroom. This was a result of prioritizing the house's facade and luxury cars over practicality. Alejandro liked to maintain a sense of superiority, differentiating himself from others. This trait led people to speculate that envy might have motivated the crime. Family's day began at 4:30 a.m. to accommodate everyone using the single bathroom. Alejandro, not satisfied with the local school standards, sent his children to a school 2 hours away, resulting in much of their day spent in the car. He also avoided mingling with neighbors due to economic disparities, leading to his children being isolated and not playing with other kids in the neighborhood. Alejandro was particularly protective of Lorena, noticing that some older men were trying to woo her, despite her being only 13. Sadly, their end was truly tragic. The crime scene in the main bedroom was shocking, leading the officers to examine the other bedrooms with heavy hearts. The first room they entered, adorned in pastel colors, appeared to belong to Lorena, with clothes and various items scattered around. They noticed a sports shoe without laces and cigarette ashes on the bed, along with a bear-shaped lamp missing its cable. There were no signs of blood or the girls. In the next room, they found a body under the sheets, surrounded by blood. Underneath was Lorena's lifeless body with multiple wounds and hands tied with the shoelaces from the sports shoe in the previous room. The last room, more of a storage area without windows, held the lifeless bodies of Erica and Jasmine, their hands bound with the cable from Lorena's bear-shaped lamp. Alejandro Jr., the 3-year-old, was the sole survivor of this massacre. Due to his young age, he couldn't provide reliable testimony, only repeating that a doctor had operated on his mother. Pressuring him for more information would only cause further psychological harm. At that time in Ecatepec, 9 out of 10 crimes went unpunished, leaving residents frustrated with frequent home invasions, robberies, and threats. However, a crime as horrific as this had never occurred before in the area. Causing public outreach, people took to the streets in protest in front of police stations and the courthouse, injured by the lack of progress made by the authorities. The situation was further inflamed by negative newspaper headlines criticizing the police. Adding to the pressure, one of Phoebe's sisters was dating the son of the governor at the time, compelling the police to resolve this crime at any cost. The officers in charge were even threatened with job loss if they failed to solve the case. The police surmised that there were likely multiple assailants involved, as Alejandro was athletically built and his body indicated he had been overpowered. Since no doors or windows were forced open, it was assumed the murderer might have entered through the balcony. The murders occurred between 1 and 3 a.m. Another disturbing detail was that Lorena had been assaulted. The police needed to investigate further the fact that the entire family had attended a party for the daughter of a swimming instructor at one of Alejandro's schools. They left the party around 10 p.m., and a family friend drove Phoebe and the children home since Alejandro continued drinking with a friend at another location. At 11 p.m., Alejandro and his friend entered a bar where they drank large amounts of whiskey and rum. Alejandro attempted to leave with a dancer nicknamed Vicky, but she declined and instead left with his friend. Around 1:30 a.m., the friend and Vicky decided to go to a hotel, but first dropped Alejandro at his home. Given the timing, the police began to suspect Vicky and the friend, Salvador Galarza, whose statements were inconsistent. Initially, he claimed he saw Alejandro enter his house, but an investigation revealed that Alejandro, having forgotten his keys and being drunk, decided to enter through the balcony. This explained why one of his shoes was found there. Salvador failed to mention that Alejandro had a mistress who was investigated but seemed unrelated to the crime. After thoroughly investigating Salvador's actions that night, he also appeared not to be the culprit, with his inconsistent testimonies likely due to being extremely drunk. The investigation was exhaustive, with even Phoebe's brother, Doctor, being interrogated, since the child mentioned a doctor operated on his mother. The police explored this lead, along with any other slight clue. They also questioned individuals Alejandro had affected, which were not few in number. For Alejandro, money was paramount, and he didn't hesitate to step on others to achieve his goals. He had recently dismissed several employees from his school without proper severance pay. This issue even reached the courts, but Alejandro won, which many attributed to corruption, as he was acquainted with the judge. Additionally, when constructing the school's swimming pool, he hired an architect but refused to pay after receiving the plans, secretly making copies and having the pool built by other workers. He was also known for stealing business ideas from others in his circle and was infamous for various scams, often not paying when he could get away with it. Lorena's diary revealed that the children were unhappy with the strict lifestyle imposed by their parents. She felt out of place, unable to play with neighborhood kids due to her father's disdain for lower economic classes. She also didn't fit in at her upscale school, where she was mocked for wearing old, outdated clothes and not indulging in luxuries like her classmates. Teachers at the school confirmed Lorena and her sisters were isolated, not mingling with others. This diary entry painted a different picture of Alejandro, contrasting the hard-working image he had cultivated. Despite having the means, he preferred spending on mistresses, alcohol, cars, and maintaining a high-class image, neglecting his children's needs for better clothing and entertainment. Weeks passed without any leads, as there were no security cameras, DNA evidence, or witnesses. Then, on March 17, 1992, the police received an anonymous call from a woman claiming to know the identity of the Chavez Lopez family's murderer, Jose Julio Cipriano Luna, a local metal worker who knew Alejandro. She alleged that the day after the murders, Cipriano stayed near her house, and his clothes, when washed, were covered in blood. In the following days, he was visibly ill, often vomiting. When asked why she delayed reporting this, the woman said she saw Cipriano returning to his old ways and felt it was time. Someone stopped him. She refused further contact, only providing the suspect's supposed address before hanging up. Jose Julio Cipriano Luna, 28 years old, lived in Ecatepec, close to Alejandro's residence. Alejandro, for his automobile restoration projects, required metalworking services, which led him to do business with Cipriano. This connection made Cipriano a person of interest to the police, but they faced a significant hurdle. The anonymous call was not strong enough evidence to incriminate Cipriano, and it was discovered that he lived in another municipality. This posed a jurisdictional issue for the Ecatepec police. At that time, there were no cooperation agreements between police forces, or they required judicial intervention, which could delay the process and risk the suspect fleeing or harming another victim. The only option was to steal the suspect, meaning to detain him in a location outside their jurisdiction for interrogation, hoping for a confession. If they couldn't prove the suspect's culpability immediately, they had to release him. If found guilty, he could then be taken to the appropriate jurisdiction. However, if the local police caught them in the act, their careers could be jeopardized. Despite the risks, on March 20th, 1992, 3 officers, Andres Garcia Bonilla, Arturo Martinez, and Ernesto Camarena, decided to carry out this operation in his municipality. They went undercover, avoiding bathing, wearing dirty clothes, and keeping their hair long to blend into the impoverished area. They only had the suspect's name from an anonymous call. Their plan was to inquire about a metal worker near the provided address. However, they soon realized that many in the area were metal workers. As time was against them, the officers came up with the idea of checking the transparent boxes displaying business permits, which were publicly visible and contained the owner's surnames. In one of these boxes, they found the name Cipriano Luma, when Camarina, who was alone and unarmed at that moment, asked nearby individuals about the metalworkers' whereabouts. He received curt and hostile responses, being told that Cipriano no longer worked there and to ask elsewhere. Guided by intuition and the information from the anonymous call that Cipriano lived in his parents' house, the officers eventually found the house and inquired about the metalworker. The officers approached a man who, with suspicion, asked why they were looking for his son. Fortunately, the car the officers were using was damaged, and they managed to convince the man that they needed metalworking services. Believing their story, he informed them that his son, the metalworker, no longer lived there, but was now residing with his mother-in-law. He gave them directions to the new address. After about an hour, the officers located the place. With fewer metal workers around, they inquired about one and were approached by a man in his mid-20s. Fitting the suspect's description, the challenge now was to get him into the car willingly. Officer Camarina, pretending ignorance about the suspect's identity, fabricated a story about an issue with an engineer to which the suspect, Cipriano, surprisingly admitted he owed money to an engineer and agreed to discuss it in the car. Once in the vehicle, the officers drove to a secluded area to confront him, hoping for a confession. They avoided mentioning the murders initially, engaging in small talk to ease into the conversation. When they reached the isolated spot, Camarina asked the other officers to step away, intending to speak to Cipriano one-on-one without intimidating him. Unsure how to get Cipriano to talk about the case, Camarina showed him a photo of the Chavez Lopez family. Cipriano's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes widened dramatically, betraying his shock. He tried to maintain composure, denying knowing the family. Officer Camarina confronted him directly about his involvement in the crime, leading Cipriano to break down and offer 10 million pesos for his release, claiming the money was at his father's house. Camarina cleverly did not immediately accept or reject the offer, but asked for the location of his father's house, confirming it was the same house they had visited earlier. Pressing further about why Cipriano was so eager to bribe him, Cipriano became visibly nervous. Realizing he had trapped Cipriano, Camarina finally got him to confess to committing the crime. The details Cipriano provided about the house, the timing, and the condition of the bodies deeply disturbed Officer Camarina. He had become obsessed with the case, meticulously investigating every aspect and learning the gruesome specifics from Cipriano turned his stomach. Cipriano also revealed he had 2 accomplices, one of whom had assaulted Lorena. This new information meant that the police now needed more physical evidence to track down the other 2 culprits. During the investigation, Phoebe's sister was asked to check the Chavez Lopez house for missing items. Among the few things stolen were a video cassette recorder and a gold pendant that she had given to Phoebe. These items were later found at Cipriano's house, confirming his involvement. Cipriano confessed the motive behind orchestrating the murders was rooted in his resentment towards Alejandro. Alejandro had hired Cipriano, a humble metalworker, to restore one of his cars. At one point, Alejandro felt that Cipriano was taking too long to finish the job and decided to retrieve his car from the garage without paying Cipriano the owed 600,000 pesos, equivalent roughly $100. Cipriano harbored deep resentment and anger towards Alejandro, who flaunted his wealth yet refused to pay for services rendered. This resentment grew into fantasies of revenge, which materialized when Cipriano met others who also despised Alejandro. One accomplice, Alejandro Cruz, 18, was a street vendor, while the other was Adam Robledo, 20 years old. On December 1st, 1991, the day before the murders, the 3 suspects attended the same party as the Chavez Lopez family. Alejandro was the center of attention at the event, laughing and drinking with his friend. During the night, Cipriano approached Alejandro to ask for the money he was owed, only to be dismissed and told he wouldn't be paid as the job was incomplete. Later that night, Adam, who was infatuated with 13-year-old Lorena, began talking to her. Upon discovering this, Alejandro confronted Adam, berating him and asserting that he had no right to consider himself Lorena's equal or to be near her. Alejandro, tired of the tensions at the party, decided to leave around 10 p.m. Shortly after his departure, a commotion erupted at the party. Adam, who had been pursuing Lorena, was caught with his pants down, assaulting another girl. This scandal quickly spread through the party, resulting in Cipriano, Cruz, and Adam fleeing after stealing kitchen knives for self-defense. Later, as they wandered the neighborhood drunk, they came across Alejandro's house around 2:30 a.m. Cipriano, filled with rage at the sight of Alejandro's wealth and remembering his unpaid debt, decided to take action. Still angry about how Alejandro had treated him earlier, agreed. The third accomplice, Cruz, skilled in picking locks, enabled them to enter the house, leading to the tragic events that unfolded. Adam, exhibiting psychopathic tendencies, even took the time to smoke a cigarette in Lorena's bed after committing the heinous acts. Alejandro, too intoxicated to fight back, was defenseless against the attackers armed with knives. The confessions of the criminals, along with the testimonies of Adam and Cruz, who were quickly apprehended, corroborated the entire story. Each of the three men was sentenced to 250 years in a maximum security prison. The gold pendant found in Cipriano's possession was a critical piece of evidence in the trial. They were confirmed as monstrous individuals, with their confession revealing they hadn't seen any children in the house as they committed the crimes in the dark. This likely spared the life of 3-year-old Alejandro Jr., who was sleeping in his crib at the time. The child later told his grandfather that he had climbed out of his crib, which explained his injury, and unsuccessfully tried to wake his parents before leaving the house. He was eventually found by the mariachi. While Alejandro had made several enemies, the extent of the crime committed by these criminals was far beyond any reasonable retribution for his actions. To end on a positive note, Officer Camarino was recognized and promoted for his work in solving the case, a deserving accolade given the gravity and complexity of the investigation. Chance Leslie Angelbert was born December 3, 1993, and raised on a ranch near Edgemont, South Dakota. Later in life, he moved to Moorcroft, Wyoming. In 2019, he and his wife made last-minute plans to spend the July 4th weekend with his wife's family and their 3-month-old son in Gering, Nebraska, 200 miles from their home. According to his wife, on Saturday, July 6, 2019, Chance spent the afternoon golfing and drinking with his wife's relatives at the Chimney Rock Golf Course in Bayard, Nebraska. He had recently been one of hundreds laid off from work at a mine, but was supposed to start a new job that upcoming Monday. Apparently, his wife's family made a remark regarding his job or income, and he became angry and then called his wife and demanded to go back home to Moorcroft. She picked Chance up from the golf course and returned to her grandmother's home where they were supposed to be staying the weekend. They arrived around 7:20 p.m. to gather their things for the return trip to Moorcroft. It is reported that a family feud occurred at this time. According to his wife, while she was in her grandmother's home gathering their things with the baby, Chance got out of the car and walked away from the home located on O Street. 25-year-old Chance reportedly had a history of walking away to cool off when he was angry. A coworker and close friend of Chance's in Wyoming got a phone call from him after he left asking if he could pick him up and take him home. But he was unable to do so because he had friends over and had been drinking and was several hours away. He told his friend that he couldn't see any landmarks or marker posts to get his exact location. Chance also sent a text message to his aunt around the same time, but the message was hard to decipher and was unlike anything Chance had ever sent before. Online reports state that the message was unreadable and there were emojis in the message, which Chance never used. Many speculate that Chance was attempting to text his aunt, but at the same time something went wrong and the message was not intentional, but some speculate that the message was sent by someone else. His wife, Leah, spoke to him at 7:46 p.m. on his cell phone. She said he told her he was walking south, but he had also spoken to friends who said he was walking north toward Torrington, Wyoming. Chance was wearing a short-sleeved Wrangler shirt, Wrangler jeans, Roper boots, and a black and white trucker cap. He was seen on a business's surveillance video about 7:51 p.m. at the intersection of 10th Street and Martha Drive in Gering. The last time anyone heard from him was at 8:46 p.m. This was just minutes before a thunderstorm entered the area around 9 p.m. The phone was strangely turned off shortly after his last contact, although he had told his friend that he had full battery when they had recently spoken. His wife said that she thought he had probably gone into a nearby building to shelter from the weather. Her grandfather went out looking for him, but stated that he couldn't find him. He was seen on surveillance video walking along, sometime between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m., at the intersection of Terry Boulevard and Stable Club Road in the Terrytown subdivision. His cell phone pinged in the vicinity of Owl Road, south of the Western Travel Terminal convenience store around 10 p.m. He basically vanishes after this. The next day, his wife reported him missing and his parents joined the search for him. Strangely, his wife said she was worried that he would come home in a body bag. Even stranger, she allegedly asked law enforcement during the immediate search about getting a death certificate. Some people argue that this could have been due to her being young and naive, but some people speculate that there is more to this story than what she has shared. Her family also hired a lawyer following his disappearance and have been accused of possibly harming Chance. There have been a lot of threats against many people regarding this case. Sadly, this case also has a lot of rumors and finger-pointing, but the fact remains that Chance has not been found and his parents, friends, and loved ones are beyond devastated and frustrated. It's uncharacteristic of Chance to leave without warning, and his wife doesn't believe he would have abandoned their baby that he adored. The Gering Police Department has searched using rescue and cadaver dogs, but have come up empty. While the initial searches centered around the area of southwest Scottsbluff, a greater area has been searched using drones, along with volunteers on the ground. Unfortunately, no evidence or traces of Chance have ever been discovered, or at least nothing has ever been shared with the public. His family continues to search for him, and as of today, this case remains open and unsolved. Regina Marie Balls, who went by Gina, went missing from Duggan's Pub in downtown Lincoln, Nebraska on October 16, 2000. She would first go to the pub early in the day for a friend's baby shower and then made plans to come back that night to participate in open mic night. Gina came from a family full of musical talent, and she herself was a singer and guitarist and was looking forward to playing that night. She had also just been hired as a manager of a FedEx Kinko's and was looking forward to celebrating. After the baby shower, she went home to spend time with her 3 children before putting them to bed. She and her boyfriend, Michael, would get ready and leave with the intentions of heading back to Duggan's Pub. However, on the way, they would get into an argument and Michael decided he would rather go home. So Regina dropped him off at his apartment and continued with her plans. Even though they had gotten into an argument, they still made plans for Regina to pick Michael up later so they could go spend the night at her house. Later that night, patrons of the pub would say that Regina was in a good mood and enjoying the evening. She sat with her ex-husband Dave, who was also there, and they chatted for a little while. This might seem unusual, but it is reported that they had a very amicable divorce. She would then leave the club around 1 a.m. and tell friends she was headed to pick up Michael. They stated she was carrying her guitar and music with her, but they were unsure if she had her purse. When Michael woke up around midnight and Regina wasn't there, he thought she had gone on to her house, so he tried to go back to sleep. A few hours later, he couldn't sleep and tried to page Regina to talk. However, she had left her pager at home, and the sound of Michael paging her woke up her 3 children. They then would also notice Regina wasn't there and called their father and grandparents. Michael would call the children at 6:30 a.m., and when he realized she wasn't there, he immediately called the police to report her missing. Later that day, investigators would find her Saturn parked across the street from the pub. Her guitar and music were inside the slightly open trunk, but no purse was found at the scene. Investigators have had no luck tracking down Regina, and her family has even gone as far as to hire a private investigator to help. However, she remains missing and the case unsolved. Jason Anthony Jakosski was born on June 24, 1981 in Grand Island, Nebraska. At the age of 19, he worked at Fazoli's restaurant on 80th and Cass Street in his hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, and was attending community college part-time. On June 13, 2001, his boss called and asked him to come into work on his day off. His car was in the shop for repairs, and at first he said that he would just walk there, but then called back and planned for a coworker to pick him up at Benson High School, 7 blocks from his home. Jason was wearing a Chicago Cubs t-shirt, black dress pants, and black dress shoes. He grabbed his red work t-shirt and on his way out the door, he decided to help his younger brother Michael bring trash cans from the curb to the garage. At 10:45 a.m., a neighbor saw him carry the cans into the garage at his house, and this was the last time he was seen. Between 11:15 and 11:30 a.m., Jason's coworker called the house to find out why he hadn't met her at the high school. This is when his disappearance was discovered. A later check of security cameras at Benson High School show he never arrived on campus. He has not cashed any of his paychecks, used his cell phone or ATM card, or picked up his car from the auto repair shop since his disappearance. Jason was supposed to start a new job a week after he vanished, and was excited about it, but he never showed up to begin work there. He had no more than $60 on him the day he disappeared, and no personal items were missing from his room. His parents called police the next morning. Like so many people, the Jakoskis mistakenly believed there was a 24-hour wait before police would accept a missing persons report. His mother stated that it took at least another 10 days before police took Jason's disappearance seriously because he was an adult. According to the family, Jason did not have a history of running away, was not a troubled teen, had no reason to run off. From the beginning, his family feared an accident or abduction. Despite mounted and ground searches, a helicopter, and the use of infrared technology, there was no sign of Jason or any clues to his whereabouts. His loved ones suspect foul play may have been involved in his disappearance. They say he is too responsible to leave without warning, and he was not having any problems when he went missing. He is described as a shy person who was not involved with drugs or alcohol and was close to his family. In the aftermath of his disappearance, Jason's parents, Kelly and Jim Jakosski, successfully campaigned for Jason's Law, a statewide database for missing people. As of today, this case remains unsolved. Leah Rollins was a divorced mother of 2 sons in Dawson County, Nebraska in 1997. She worked at the Cosette Amoco gas station on Highway 80, where she was promoted to manager on March 9, 1997. The next morning at 10:30 a.m., a 1993 red Pontiac Grand AM pulled into the gas station parking lot, and the driver filled up with gas and then entered the store. Even though the weather was cold, the man was barefoot and had his pants rolled up. When he initially entered the store, Leah was ringing up a mother and daughter. So the man walked to the back of the store, apparently waiting on them to leave. He grabbed a soda and proceeded to drink it, and at one point stared right into the surveillance camera. He then walked up to the counter and appeared to be demanding cash. On the video, Leah opened the cash register, handed him the money, and was then instructed to lie on the floor. The man then leaned over the counter and shot Leah 3 times. He then left and drove away with a lighter, a pack of cigarettes, a full tank of gas, and $150 in cash. The car did not have a front license plate, and the surveillance footage of the rear of the vehicle was too grainy to make out, but it is reported to have been a California license plate. The ballistics did not match any other crime on record. He also left fingerprints on the gas pump and the counter. Unfortunately, investigators were unable to find a fingerprint match in any of their databases. Despite the CCTV footage airing on America's Most Wanted twice over the years and the news, no one has identified the suspect. Was he a random man passing through and had no connection to the area? Was he a transient with no family, and that is why no one has identified him? Or was he hired by her ex-husband? Police believe that this wasn't the first crime like this that he had committed due to appearing self-assured and cold in his actions. The case has been compared with other similar acts on gas station workers over the years, but apparently no links have been made. Many people speculate that her ex-husband Barry had hired someone to do it. The suspect looked like someone from a beach area, the way his pants were rolled up and with him being barefoot. Barry and Leah had gone through an ugly divorce. Barry had owned and ran a restaurant on the U.S. Virgin Islands before Leah had left him and taken their 2 sons and a sum of money. Several years prior to the tragedy, she had written a 16-page letter to her sons explaining why she had left their father the way she did. She wrote about years of abuse and how she feared him. The fingerprints, ballistics evidence, and video footage remain on file in Nebraska. Leah's ex-husband passed away in 2015 and was never officially named as a suspect. Sadly, no matches have been made after all these years, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Cornelius Hajes was born June 2, 1986. When he was 2 years old, he became sick and suffered from kidney failure and had 1 kidney removed. This led to him having developmental disabilities, but despite all this, he grew up to be 6 feet and 3 inches tall and graduated high school. He then moved into his own apartment in downtown Omaha, Nebraska. He had his own car, but he preferred to walk or ride his bike. His parents, Diane and Kenny, described him as quiet, kind, and said that he often kept to himself. On October 24, 2016, 30-year-old Cornelius had spent the weekend at his parents' home around 41st and Ohio Streets in Omaha. He and his mother had gone to the movies and then went home. At around 1 a.m., he decided to walk back to his apartment, which his mother stated was not unusual for him to do late at night. His apartment was 3 miles away from her home. The next morning, his mother called him to make sure he got home okay, but did not get an answer. She repeatedly called him, and by that evening, she decided to go to his apartment to look for him. When she arrived, she said it was clear that he had not made it home the night before. She then filed a missing persons report that evening, and his family began searching for him. Nearly a week later, on October 30th, a body was found behind a house underneath a vehicle near 30th and Hamilton Street, just blocks from his mother's home. The body was badly decomposed, and the residents who called the police initially thought it was a Halloween prank. The body was sadly identified as Cornelius, and it was determined that he had been shot. His parents believed that he was killed by someone on Hamilton Street who knew that he frequently walked in the neighborhood. There was a big Halloween party on Hamilton Street the night that he went missing. Police stated that the residents of the house where his body was found were questioned, but said there were no reasons to believe they were involved. Sadly, his brother Samuel was also gunned down in 2013, 13 years earlier at the age of 19. Cornelius's parents are desperate for answers, but investigators have made no arrests and still don't have any persons of interest. As of today, this case remains unsolved. Sumpter County in South Carolina has one of the highest crime rates in America compared to all communities of all sizes. From the smallest towns to the very largest cities, Sumpter County is also where today's case takes place. We will be looking at a Sumpter County dose. At 6:20 a.m. on August 9, 1976, a trucker by the name of Martin Durand found the bodies of a young man and a young woman. Martin contacted Charles Graham, who is an employee at a nearby store. Charles had called the police. Both of the victims had been shot in her upper chest area. The male victim was at first believed to be between 18 and 22 years old. The forensic dentist who examined his teeth said a man was older than 27, but looked younger because of his clothing and build. The man was white with an olive complexion. He had brown shoulder-length hair, brown eyes, and very distinctive bushy eyebrows. He was over 6 feet tall and weighed about 150 pounds. The man had scars on his shoulders and back had indicated he had played contact sports. He was wearing faded Levi brand jeans and a red t-shirt. He had on a yellow gold Bulova Accutron wristwatch. He also had a 14-karat gold ring with a gray sapphire stone. The initials JPF were engraved inside a ring. It made investigators believe his name started with the letter J. The ring and the watch were expensive and dental work on his teeth were elaborate. This all suggested that he had come from an affluent family. The female victim seemed to be younger than the man. She was initially believed to be between 18 and 20 years old. She was 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighed 100 pounds, and had a slim build and an olive complexion just like the male victim. Some people then believed that the two victims were possibly siblings. She had brown shoulder-length hair and bluish-gray eyes. On her left side of her face were 2 distinctive moles close to her mouth. These rings were worn by her. The rings appeared to be handmade, Native American or Mexican costume jewelry. The male victim was referred to as Jakosski and a female victim was referred to as Jane Doe. Jakosski was named that because someone told investigators he met the two victims a few months before they were found, and then the male victim said his name was Jock. A year after the two victims were found, in 1977, a man was arrested in Latta, South Carolina for driving while intoxicated. In his car, investigators found a revolver. It was the same kind as the one used on a Sumpter County dose. After some more investigating, it was proven that exact revolver was used in a Sumpter County dose case. The man who owned it was never arrested because of insufficient evidence against him. Investigators also traveled to Brunswick, Georgia. There they met with her husband and wife, who believed they were the parents of the Jane Doe. Their daughter was missing. However, after investigators showed them pictures of the Jane Doe, they realized it was not their daughter. Dental comparisons confirmed it was not her. People speculated that Henry Lee Lucas committed a crime. He himself told investigators had he had been in South Carolina the day the victims passed away. Henry Lee Lucas, however, is known for making false confessions. No evidence has ever been found and linked him to the crime. The two victims' bodies were held at a local funeral home, hoping someone could identify them. People from all over the U.S. and even Canada called to inquire about them. This included several parents of young runaways. No one was able to identify the bodies. On August 14, 1977, they were buried in a cemetery in Oswego, South Carolina. Hundreds of people attended the service. Law enforcement was able to raise a few $100s to the funeral home. Their headstones read, "Male unknown and female unknown." The Sumpter County Doe's case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries Season 7, Episode 14 in 1995. In February 2007, their bodies were exhumed to obtain DNA information. It was then realized that the victims were not genetically related. In July 2019, the DNA Doe Project was asked to help identify the couple. Over $2,000 was donated to fund the extraction of usable DNA profiles from bone marrow for genetic genealogy research. In October 2020, family trees of the victims were created. Then, on January 21, 2021, a press conference was held to announce the identities of the two victims. They were identified as Pamela Buckley and James Freund. Pamela was born on December 16, 1951 in Redwood County, Minnesota. She was last seen in December 1975 in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Pamela was 24 years old when she passed away. James Paul Freund was born on September 16, 1946 in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. He grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. After he graduated from J.P. McCaskey High School, he got married in 1965. He and his wife had a daughter together. Thereafter, he joined the U.S. Army. Also in 1965, he was dispatched to an army base in Germany. The next year, James's father passed away. His father-in-law had worked at a Bulova watch company. It is believed he gave James the watch as a present with the initials, JPF, engraved. James returned to his family in the United States. His marriage broke down and James disappeared on Christmas Day, 1975. He was just 29 years old when he passed away. Sadly, his mother would never find out what happened to her son, as she passed away in February 2004 in Mason, Ohio at the age of 77. Investigators believe James and Pamela became acquainted as they hitchhiked. It is not known who took their lives. Sheriff Anthony Dennis said, "It is great to be able to bring the family some closure after starting this investigation so many years ago. We also plan to reopen the investigation and follow up with a person of interest." Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.